Tag on it. Do we have a quorum?
Yeah.
Very good. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, which is one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Mr. Elshire? Commissioner Maynard? Commissioner Barron?
Here.
Commissioner Alden?
Here.
Mr. Borman?
Yes.
Commissioner Cox?
Here.
One of these that's supposed to be for me.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes of the last meeting? Anybody have any corrections?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Gary? We now take up the first matter of proposed subdivision up north with, matter of vacating right away. Application, does staff have comments?
So this vacation request was presented in front of the Board of Aldermen, and they, voted to have it put in front of the Planning and Zoning Committee for discussion and review.
I think that could be something that always comes before us first. I think the state law is a little vague on that, but anyway, I'd make a recommendation that we change the subdivision ordinance to require that vacations be heard before the P and Z board. We've always done that in the past.
Don's right, although I'm not sure there might be some other section of city code under the duties of planning and zoning that implies that it comes before the easy first.
I don't have direct access to Sydney. She is in the meeting.
Do you, text her and
She's in the meeting. Sydney, do you have any, comment? Okay.
see that if you don't mind, huh? We'll investigate that. Back to specific vacation. We have the application, we have surveys, how it fits in with the proposed subdivision, and we have, as of tonight, a letter from the other adjacent property owner that says that he is in agreement. I'm a little unsure about picking a rag from. Can we pass this without getting a little bit farther along in subdivision process? Sooner or later, somebody's got to be relying on a third party. Either they're going to be relying on the city to do this, or we're going to be relying on to do developer to get to phase two to complete the process. I just wanna make sure we don't put ourselves in a bind.
I've dealt with the county before, and the way they do it is they require the vacation to take place before the plat. That, then they hold the vacation until the plat is approved, until the plat comes before them. The vacation is only approved at that point by the, county commission immediately prior to the plat being approved, because they now have both of them before them.
Let's first of all discuss the wisdom of the vacation. Does anybody have any objections to it?
If I could interrupt for just a moment, if all of you could please speak clearly and loudly into your microphones tonight, that's the only way, that they can hear you clearly and legibly online.
So,
Thank you.
objections to this?
The adjacent landowner is willing to go along with it. I don't see why there would be any objection.
I concur with that. That was, I think, the topic that came up about damage of people and so forth like that. So I would agree with that as well, with the letter that's in support for the person that would be damaged by it.
Are you opening this public discussion right now? Is that the thought?
Not a formal public hearing.
Okay. I just didn't know if you want me to give you a rundown of the packet that you guys received, and just give you a breakdown of exactly what the intent is and how it works out. That's all.
I think we've received going on 7 documents, and I think it's pretty clear.
Okay. No, I just wanted to make sure that, the intent was clear and that it made sense and I could walk you through it and go through each of the figures if need be.
John, you being the surveyor, are you satisfied that it's okay?
Yeah.
This not being an advertised public hearing, there will be one for any ordinance that I believe, it goes before the Board of Aldermen at whatever time there is a requirement for a public hearing on it.
Sydney will cover all that. Yep.
All right. Would somebody care to move that we recommend to the city council that the vacation be approved, recorded at such time as the final subdivision plat is ready for recording?
Make the motion that, we recommend, approval of the vacation. But the approval, by the Board of Aldermen be held until the final plat comes before them. It shows this.
All right, any other discussion? You call a roll on this?
Excuse me, Commissioner Alshire,
She's gotta be on camera.
Commissioner Maynard,
Marilyn, she's gotta be on camera to vote.
There you go. Yep.
Commissioner Maynard, Commissioner Barron,
Yes.
Commissioner Alden,
Yeah.
Commissioner Borman,
Yes.
Commissioner Cox.
Yes.
Motion carries. Next item is preliminary plat review for Mayberry subdivision preliminary plat. documents and drawings on that. It is, again, it's not a scheduled public hearing. Already seen that. Has the city council acted on the sketch plan?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Has the city council already acted to approve it?
Yes.
Step. You have. Staff has reviewed it along with the building engineer. You have any further recommendations by those that we listed in the packet?
No, staff report was very thorough.
Any comments? Questions?
I have a few comments. Is there a submission date on the plat?
Like on the plat?
Yes.
So,
4/2/2025.
Where is that?
In the title block in 2 locations and underneath the seal.
Oh, okay. I don't know that I've ever seen a preliminary plat with no lot dimensions on it. It does say the location of existing property lines and adjoining streets and alleys. It says approximate dimensions of each boundary line of the property. I would assume that that would mean lot lines, since those are those will become property lines also.
There was a particular reason why, lot lines was included.
The lot lines are included. I guess the width is not measured, right, part of the boundary of kind of what the property line would be. The checklist for the preliminary plat does not require, I guess, there to be, distance and bearings on all of the proposed lot lines, because it's a preliminary plat, so those can get adjusted slightly. It just shows general intent to be in conformance with the city code, if that makes sense.
Yes, but you've got, in here the minimum size lots, maximum size lots, which is something that is required. There's no way to verify any of that without having lot dimensions.
There's a scale on the piece of paper. Like I said, the lot dimensions were not on the checklist of something that needed to be required, so.
It says approximate dimensions of boundary lines,
And we showed the outer boundary line with the bearings and distance.
so you're saying the lot lines aren't boundary lines?
It didn't say the individual lot lines.
It doesn't say existing boundary lines either.
Okay, then we can remove that as well, or disregard the.
No, it says you gotta have boundary lines, it doesn't specify that existing ones or whether it's.
We show boundary lines, we don't show distances and measurements of that.
Hey, I've never seen a preliminary plat with no dimensions on a lot line.
Well, here's one you can look at right now. I mean, it's in conformance with every requirement on the preliminary plat checklist.
I'm not sure that I would agree because lot lines are boundary lines.
You know, this is an exhibit to show general intent. What the preliminary plat does. It's not a final document that gets recorded.
Understand?
I'm just trying to.
But I've never seen a preliminary plat. I've never seen a single preliminary plat that has no dimensions on the lot line.
Well, I'd suggest looking at maybe revising the checklist if you're wanting to have lot dimensions on the preliminary plat that provide, bearings and distances.
In my opinion, it says boundary line, so I would assume that that would mean that. I know this going on. I see a sewer line at the end of the Andy Court cul-de-sac.
Well, hold on, let's hold on a second. Let's go back to the topic on the floor first, and let's clean that one as we go along, not have a laundry list of things to discuss. The question I'm asking is this: in the requirements for this phase of application, does it meet the minimum requirements, or we have a question about that, Sarah, based upon what Don has said?
City staff agreed in going over the preliminary plat checklist that is in our code that it met the conditions of the code.
That's one, how do you define boundary lines?
It does, but that's a matter of opinion at this point. And
I'd like to get you
If the
before a judge and
commission-
ask that.
if the commission decides that they do want that, they can approve that as a condition for the plat to be approved, that it be added.
Okay, so let's go to the next one. I kind of want to keep these, where I don't get confused, okay? So we'll go.
I think they should be added to the plat.
Speak to that? The dimensions? May I speak to that? Understanding what Mr. Simon's saying, that these are meant to represent an intent. That's fine.
Mr. Harris, I'm sorry, would you mind coming up to the microphone so that online members can hear?
The intent may be fine, I understand that. And to the letter of what the current checklist says, that may be fine, I understand that. Based on this is a preliminary plat. The sketch plat has been accepted and probably had some issues apparently. This is a preliminary plat. Without these lot dimensions on here, how do you sit here tonight and know that these intended lots will meet the existing requirements for the lot size area in this zoning? Without that information, tonight, you can't say that this plan meets the lot size requirements for the approved zoning district. And all they've got to do is be off by 6 inches. And you're deficient on your lot size area. I'm not trying to be difficult, but it's a matter that there's not enough information here tonight, and maybe that's going to be on the final plat. I would assume it would, but at some point
It would have to be.
it would have to be. But at some point you keep kicking the can down the road, saying, "Well, we'll deal with it at the next step." No, so we're going to be the next step, going, "Oh crap, we can't put this genie back in the bottom." And that's my only question on not having. I would agree, of all of the plats I've looked at over the years, they've always got the lot size on there so that someone would know, does that meet the requirement for that zoning district?
And that doesn't mean that
Yeah, I would just say that, if the final plat is, final plat, if the lots aren't meeting the code, then the final plat would not get approved. That's what I would ask you do. I mean, it's pretty simple. This is a preliminary plat. If we get to the platting stage and the lots don't conform to the R3 multifamily category, then the final plat should not be approved.
it should be on the preliminary plat. It should always be on the preliminary plat, because that's how you know. And I'm not saying those dimensions can't be subject to some variation between the preliminary and the final plat. You don't always have all that information beforehand to get them exact. So yes, sometimes they shift a little bit. That doesn't make any difference.
We're trying to keep this concise and neat, and understanding that labeling each one of these lots would have probably added a few more pages. We could have easily done it. It's not that difficult. But ultimately, these lot sizes are going to change. It's going to slide one way or the other. Once we finalize the construction design, maybe we got a manhole for a sewer that's going to end up landing, a couple feet this way. We might shift that property line a couple feet that way. So the property lines and where they're located at don't necessarily matter at the preliminary plat stage. The intent of the preliminary plat is to establish the number of lots, the approximate layout of the subdivision, the service of utilities, and the overall flow or pattern of the subdivision.
I would disagree. I think the preliminary, that the dimensions are necessary.
They're not necessary because the lots are gonna change when we go into design after we get approval of this. And if the final plat doesn't meet the requirements of R3, then it shouldn't be approved.
Well, I'm in.
And like I said, I've got no problem putting it together and just split. No, I could definitely provide a layout that shows all the dimensions. I've got no problem doing that. It didn't ask me to dimension each individual lot, so I didn't show it on this, but I can have that ready for the next meeting, no problem.
Can we move forward with that? The question I have for it, getting to the council, right? Can it be moved forward and with the criteria that it has to meet, we have to have the dimension, all the dimensions for the lots before we would, and go through us. What do you got?
Well, I was just gonna say, at some point, maybe we need to suggest that we would add that to the
I
checklist.
got it right here.
Okay.
I got it right here.
Let's start with that.
Yeah, I got it written down.
To make sure that what we're requiring
Certainly,
people.
that should be a requirement.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, before
we've got that. I've got that noted already.
Checklist follow, unless you guys have changed it.
No,
No, it follows the preliminary plan.
It's the language and the description of what's required for preliminary. And that language has been around for 60 or 70 years, and it basically parallels most other ordinances I've read. It does. And so I think it wise, number one, is to do is that we put that on.
Specify the dimensions, what that is.
Before we make another change in the subdivision ordinance, we back to put that stipulation in, that, it can be approximate, I guess.
Yes.
We use our judgment. I think I agree with Sarah that, it doesn't need to hold up this, we can approve or disapprove with a stipulation that new copies of plat be provided with that information.
That's what I was asking.
And it's still clear that it's approximate information, dimensions, and that, you're still required to comply with the finished ordinance.
Like I said,
That's why I asked the question I did. It does to me, yep.
Right.
So we could make the stipulation that we could move it forward with that to be provided, correct? Yeah. And note being taken by you and Tara that the checklist needs to be changed to be very clear about that moving forward.
Well, that requires a change in the ordinance.
That's right.
Public
To
hearing.
get it, we'll have to do that.
So the outer boundary of the property that's to be developed does have varying distances. That's the way I interpreted that, since these are preliminary and they're not actual lots. I have no problem creating a display that gives you the lot dimensions and, you know, bearings and distance around each individual lot. But do understand they are gonna change. The project is not moved into construction, the construction documents haven't been created. So there'll be adjustments, there'll be tweaking, and ultimately they're all gonna move, just so you understand that. Because the owner or my client has not moved forward with development construction documents because he's not sure that, uh, it really wants this project or wants to move forward. You know? I can do that, no problem. But, ultimately, I guess I can add a note to that preliminary plat, just noting that these lots are subject to change dimensionally. I mean, technically, if you wanted to, I mean, it could just be one whole lot. The whole property could just be one whole lot with public streets going through it, you know, or whatever lots are broken up between streets. You know, but the intent is to try and keep these into, you know, manageable small lots so it can be broken up and phased appropriately and everything.
What Cindy says is you gotta have a lot of,
I understand that, and like I said, maybe I misunderstood it. I did provide the varying distances for a lot of dimensions going around the perimeter of the existing property that's shown on the plat. I didn't realize that they wanted it for each individual one, but it can be provided, no problem.
We're gonna have probably some other things that we need to discuss and might make further stipulations on the approval. So let's file that one away. With your agreement, we shouldn't have any problems.
Yeah. No problem.
Council. It's always approved.
It's set for, the meeting later this month. Mhm.
What's your time?
It would just take me a couple days.
We understand that.
That's all. That's the
But
biggest thing I
Still
want.
have to change in conformance with
Yep,
the
exactly.
minimum basic.
Needs to meet code. It's there.
You have further comments?
Yeah. I see an easement, well, I see a sewer line, between lots, well, at the end of Andy Court. It doesn't have a right of way, or have an easement shown on it. It would need a utility easement added there.
Yep, that can be picked up in the final plat, no problem.
The, not final plat, the preliminary plat before it goes to council.
Okay, well, I mean, what I'm saying is that sewer line might not be there.
If you're gonna show it, you need to have an
Okay.
easement on it.
I understand. It's public
Okay.
infrastructure, yeah. You do.
It says you gotta have the dimension and purpose of all easements, which is fine. That one did not. But I see in several other places where we have 16-foot sanitary sewer easements. Our standard is 20 foot. Those need to be corrected.
This, I mean, it was reviewed with Public Works, and I don't believe we had any issues or concerns with the easement that was presented. Matthew, is that something that you want me to change, is to, 20-foot sewer easement?
The ordinance says, the width of the utility easement shall be determined by the city administrator, but shall generally not be less than 10 feet when adjoining street right of way, or be not less than a total of 20 feet when not adjoining the street right of way. 20 feet is our standard.
I'm trying to pull up the plat. Which one are we, where are you at?
It's
The
just a-
storm sewer one? Is that what you're talking about, or sanitary?
Sanitary sewer ones. Any place that says, that you got an easement that's less than, 20 feet that goes, that is not along a street, needs to be changed to a 20-foot
So,
minimum.
so what about the additional easements that were requested, they're on 10-foot?
Those are for like electric in the backyard. There's been,
Those we've done without any problem, because those are shallow.
Okay. So
Like-
10-foot,
like-
okay, 16-foot no, 20-foot okay?
Right.
So it's either 10 or 20 then?
Pretty much. I mean, it doesn't mean that you can't go wide.
Understand, yeah.
Which, ordinance are you talking about, Don?
The
Yeah.
subdivision, ordinance,
Do you have a reference there for the?
yes, 30-1, 30.1-21, easements, first item.
Yeah, we can accommodate 20.
I mean, it shouldn't be any problem.
Nope.
Next item. All lots in the original subdivision shall be numbered consecutively from 1 through the total number of lots, even though the subdivision may be recorded in sections. These are numbered rather weirdly.
We tried to make it clear between phases and lot. If you want to over it, 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm just telling you what the ordinance says. That's 30.1-24, lot identification, size, and arrangement. There's a lot on here that doesn't have a lot number or a designation, and it's obviously too small to build upon.
Lot is that?
This one,
That's lot 212. It's part of lot 212. That is a.
Oh, okay.
sewer main
So-
that runs down it.
that lot goes all the way across there then?
That's correct.
Okay. I thought it was a separate.
No, it's just a sewer line that is running across it and it makes it look like a property line.
Okay, the sewer line that runs north, in the street, there where the street's being vacated, I assume that sewer line is running in the part that would go to, Ron Stewart when the street's vacated.
That's correct.
Okay, so you'll need to have an easement, get an easement from him.
It's within the utility easement that's left over that is being
They're
dedicated.
only vacating the road right of way. They're only asking to vacate the road right of way, not the utility right of way.
If you look at exhibit 3, I believe it is.
Okay.
that'll show you.
Well, I saw those and I thought that's what it might be, but I wasn't sure because I didn't know the plot.
Yeah, it's noted on the preliminary plat. It says
Okay.
30-foot utility easement right of way to be vacated, new property line after street right of way.
Nope. I just wanted to clarify it. There's sanitary sewer shown on the south side of lots, it's hard to read the lot numbers. On the south side of Barney, Street, that easement doesn't have a width on it. That needs to be added. Couple other questions. Where's the west lot, or west boundary line? So,
It is in the middle of Jefferson Street.
that's not what seems to be indicated by this.
Shows 40-foot right of way easement for both 55, page 80, and then shows the additional 40-foot of right of way to be dedicated with the plat.
But it's not kind of left off of there, it kind of implies otherwise.
No, it actually shows the dimension screen exactly where that's located.
Well, I realize that, I looked at the dimension on it. But it is confusing.
So how would you like that done?
Well, I think the boundary line ought to go out there and clearly mark it.
Right, and then, so you wanna show the property line going down the middle of Jefferson
Yeah.
Street?
And then the fact that it's being dedicated, which you do say.
We do have it there, it's just grayed out so that they understand that we are in fact dedicating right of way to accommodate that street.
There's a note on there that says 40-foot right-of-way easement per book 55, page 80, which is Barella subdivision. That plat has absolutely nothing to do with this.
That's the reference we were given when we looked at that. I can verify what page. It's gonna be relevant when the right of way gets dedicated, but.
Well, I mean, it's an arterial street. The requirement is 40 foot. That's in the subdivision. Nothing to do with Barella subdivision. Barella subdivision is on the other side of the road.
So there's an existing right of way easement of 40 foot on the frontage of the property that we were just showing, because typically, so
No, that's never been dedicated.
it shows it dedicated on, I believe on the DARE survey, under survey.
It shows there's 40 foot between pins. It doesn't say that that's right. There's no right of way that's ever been dedicated. It has to be done by the final plat.
It's not right of way, it's an easement.
It's an easement by public use, but it wouldn't go out to 40 feet. It's 15 feet by statute plus the top of the bank.
No, it's recorded in book 55, page 8 yet.
55 page 8, plat book 5580 is Barella subdivision, which is across the street. It has nothing to do with this area.
Well, I believe from the not Alta, I'm sorry. I believe from the title policy, it returned a 40-foot width of right-of-way easement that was dedicated on the frontage of Jefferson for the property.
As far as I'm aware of, there's
Okay,
never been
I'll
any
remove it,
right-of-way
I'll delete
dedicated.
that, it's not a big deal, it won't be relevant once the right-of-way is dedicated. So remove that altogether.
Remove that statement, yes.
Did they ever approve the final plat of the Barilla subdivision?
Yes.
They did, okay.
Are you aware that, on lots, on residential land where more than 3 acres, where there's land disturbance on more than 3 acres, that the stormwater discharge for the 10-year storm development shall equal, to or be less than the pre-development?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, and you,
Yep, commented on my stormwater lot, which is identified as C1.
okay.
And then the preliminary plat notes that the common lot C1 is intended for stormwater detention purposes.
I mean, I just want you to be aware of it.
No, it's fine. Yes, I'm aware of the stormwater requirements.
While you're looking, you're aware that there will have to be a traffic study.
Yeah, we provided a traffic analysis to kind of give a breakdown of what the trips are and what they're generating to give you an idea of a basis of kind of what the designation of these streets would be. We concur with kind of a grid approach and identifying it as a north-south corridor as being a collector. That makes perfect sense from a standpoint. So quite a bit wider street. We understand that, but I do believe from long-term planning stance, it makes sense. So did you get a chance to go through the, the traffic report?
Traffic report is not something that you will do, it's something that a traffic engineer will do.
Yep, well, the point I'm trying to make is that, when you do a study, the city is going to consult with MoDOT if you haven't already done so in the process of developing the study. MoDOT decides that they want 100-foot right away instead of an 80-foot right away.
MoDOT's not involved in this aside from we're tying to their street. Like, it's not right, like they can't take property from us.
No, but they can ask us to.
Like, where would that occur at?
whenever you present the traffic study.
No, I mean, like, where would they take right of way? Because we don't have any frontage on the Modoc Street.
That
Jefferson
doesn't keep
Street,
them from asking it.
Jefferson Street is taken over by the city.
isn't it?
Jefferson Street is a city street.
So we are donating 40 foot of our property along the frontage, all of Jefferson, to accommodate the arterial designation that street has.
And that's not required.
That's the city's.
Well, yeah, but, I was not aware that the city had assumed responsibility for that street. I don't recall the last time we paved it.
The city has
Wait.
always been responsible. ODOT has never had responsibility.
The special road
I
district.
believe they have responsibility south of Highway 22.
Yeah.
If that's what you're thinking.
North of 22 was special road district, and we took that over.
I'm less concerned, I know there's 120 feet along.
22,
Yeah,
yeah, where the tie-in would be.
That's fine. I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
And I'm just saying that there are other players that may become involved in the review process, and they may have things that it helps to look at
Yeah, no,
contingencies before you go
yeah.
too far in your planning process.
Generally speaking, working with MoDOT previously, I don't foresee there's going to be a major issue. The intent with the permitting for the second phase for the connectivity of what's called Andy Drive to Highway 22, we will definitely have to meet with MoDOT and work through a review process for that street design and connectivity. The benefit is that is occurring within the city right of way. So whenever the city is requesting that permit and we're essentially acting as the engineer for the city, it works out a lot better working with MoDOT whenever the city wants to have that street there as well. And since this has always been dedicated as right of way for a future street, there really shouldn't be a major problem. We just needed to, at that time of developing those construction documents, we'll be coordinating with MoDOT, making sure that we meet all their standards and requirements for entering 22 there, for sure.
Final comment that I have is the right of way that the city has out there, you show that as part of your plat. And that's not part of what he owns as city property that you're going to.
Yeah, we're showing it as right of way.
I mean, I don't see it as a big deal, but it's technically not part of the property that you're dealing with.
Yeah, well, I mean, all the streets are inside the right of way that are part of our plat, so we're showing the intent of, building this street obviously within that right of way. We're showing it within the right of way of ours. So,
But if you show that as part of the property, then the city would have to sign off on it as a co-owner.
well, they'll get it dedicated to them for free.
Yes, I know. But you really don't want the city to have to sign off. You should
But they have to
put
do,
the boundary where it belongs.
so I guess, okay, I got this. We'll run this property line straight across at that stub.
Well, whatever isn't being vacated. I mean, you would include part of that up there because it's being kept in there, but part that's being vacated would be part.
Yeah, but so is all the right of way in our proposed street that's connecting to it.
But that's not part of Adair's property.
It's right of way, but we show right of way on a preliminary plat.
And I think it should be shown, but
I guess let me know what you want to see.
it's not part of the boundary of what he owns. It's part of the boundary, it's what the city owns. So the boundary line should go over there to what the city doesn't own.
But the city will own the right for the proposed street.
That's true, but the boundary line comes over to this point and goes up to here and then will come down here where it's vacated. That will be the boundary line of the plat.
So then how's it shown on the final plat when they go to plat? want to be, like, I don't
You,
care.
you
if I
won't
don't
show this
understand.
part, I mean, you may show this
Have
part,
to show it, yeah.
but you don't, that won't be included in the boundary of the plat. The city already owns it.
Gotcha.
So anything that the city already owns should be removed from what you're showing here. Because it's not part of what your plat, that's part of the city property.
Okay.
That's it.
You have agreed that all those things can be accomplished.
Yeah.
Change it with changes to the plat, just like the other suggestions that came on staff review.
Yeah, these are,
Which,
these are pretty minimal. I can take care of them relatively quick, so. That I can have them back to you before the end of the week.
not me, or
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I could have it so that everyone can review them again.
any other comments from the commission?
Mr. Chair, I thought of 2 questions. Are they?
Not hearing, but go ahead.
If this is a phased development, and phase 1 is those lots that are coming in off of Jefferson back to 105 and 110, is there any provision for any sort of, let's look at worst case scenario, permanent turnaround there if phase 1 should be all that gets developed? And then the other question would be, has there been any consideration to the necessity for any developer upgrades or improvements to Jefferson Street to accommodate turn lanes, traffic flow, that sort of thing on a street that's, not exactly always, any extra load on that street is gonna be a challenge. And the question 1, turnaround, if not wanting anything to not work, but if something should happen, we don't want a dead end street there. And that should probably be provided for. And then there probably should be some consideration to developer upgrades onto that street to handle the traffic flow.
So the T intersection with Andy Drive, Opie Lane, meets the requirement for the fire truck turnaround, it's called a hammerhead turnaround. And then, obviously with discussions with the city, we are responsible for funding improvements of Jefferson Street for the frontage of our property that remains there. And, the city code kind of outlines, what that is, but we'd be responsible for the east half of Jefferson Street and widening it. We don't believe, we're not gonna do that privately. It's gonna get escrowed into an improvement plan for improvements on Jefferson.
There is one more thing I just thought of. This first phase is showing as 55, units. In the past, we, developer, sell a piece of property to the north of town, that he couldn't do more than 35 units because of our fire code. Has our fire code changed? I can't find that anymore.
So that development is R2. This development is R3. And there's a different fire code for R3 multifamily development.
About that in a letter here.
R1 and R2 are concluded in the fire code that was in restrictive of the other development. There is a separate fire code, section for multifamily.
It is in the
It's
in that,
packet.
actually,
It's
it's
in
in
a
the-
letter, because, it was brought up before, I just wanna make sure everyone understands that. The International Fire Code for 1 or 2 family dwelling, residents or residential developments, they limit the number of dwelling units to 30 units until, a separate, means of fire access. For multifamily residential developments, they allow up to 100 dwelling units with 1 means of access. Or you can get up to 200 units if you provide fire suppression within those units as well. Once you get over the 200 dwelling units, if you're not providing fire suppression, then you have to provide a second means of access, which we accomplish in Plat 2.
Okay. That answers that question.
Yep. Good.
No other comments? Are you willing to make a recommendation? Approval with conditions?
Don, do you have all your conditions?
I think I could do that. I would recommend approval of the plat, with, under the conditions that the, lot lines, dimensions be shown. And we don't necessarily need, we just need distances, we don't need variance on all of them. Okay. Because those are at this point. Yeah. That the utility easement, or a sewer easement, whatever, be added at the end of Andy Court. That the 16-foot sanitary sewer easements be changed to 20-foot. That the width of the easement on the south side, on the lots on the south side of Barney Lane, that the width of the easement be added. And that the boundary be corrected along the Andy Drive. What is actually owned. Or will be owned when the street vacates. I think that tells
And
them.
these would be reviewed by staff and, approved in conjunction with the intent that we've established before they make a recommendation of. Does that satisfy Sydney?
Did you make the motion?
Yes.
Okay, I'll second the motion.
The larger sort of decision, I will vote.
Commissioner Alshire? Commissioner Maynard? Commissioner Barron?
Yes.
Commissioner Alden?
Yes.
Commissioner Gorman?
Yes.
Commissioner Cox?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. I make a recommendation to staff that they bring to the attention of a consulting engineer the kinds of matters that Foreman brought, so that they specifically include review of those and next we're going to discuss, height, yard, and area recommendations in the city zoning ordinance. It was not clear to me.
So this is not the first time it's been in front of you. Board is asking, sorry. The board is asking for recommendations, from planning and zoning for options, to look at, the lot line separation for the smaller lots when it's been conjoined, or merged. So they are not comfortable, just as the Planning and Zoning Commission, was not comfortable getting rid of that ordinance as it stands. But they are looking at possible easements where it would, or not easements, options where it makes sense, for an applicant to go through a process to have this.
The board, in the meeting of the board, it was that there's a need for developments in smaller lot line, or width of frontages, property, that kind of thing, secondary to the existing code for development moving forward, such as tiny homes or whatever it may be for areas, that kind of thing, and wanted some guidance on what other, what the thoughts would be about that, and whether it be R2, R3, what have you, a subcategory.
Can we get some sample ordinances from other cities? So we have an idea.
I think that would be a good idea, personally.
I know that Columbia has something. Not sure what other cities have.
Seems to me very accepting tiny homes either needs to be a new zone district or something platted out as part of a new subdivision. Be of an existing property in the city, but still be new subdivision, smaller lots, they can have a different.
So this one doesn't necessarily deal with, the tiny home that we had discussed earlier. This has to deal with, where there's been two, contiguous lots with the same owner. Two of those smaller 50 by 100 lots, and then there was a home built over that common lot line. If someone were to buy that property or a current owner, wants to tear down that house, they would want to split those two lots again, but our current ordinance states that you cannot. Once a home's been built over that common lot line, you can't. And so they're looking at if there's some different options that we can do there instead of wiping it out completely that they're not in favor of.
Could I speak to that since I kind of brought the issue? And I appreciate what you said here about, let's not muddy two issues, that the tiny homes that's probably a cool idea if it's done right, has its place. The question I raised, and I'm not the only one, is to look at, and I think this would be most applicable in the old original part of town. When you've got 50 by, in this case, 140 foot lots, there's 7,000 foot lots in an area that requires a 6,000 foot minimum. So at some point in time, 1961, for some reason, someone said, well, if you build a house across this line of two lots, you're forever one lot. An arbitrary decision.
I mentioned they copied somebody else's ordinance on that.
And I'm not going to argue that because were you ever able to find any minutes as to those meetings? Or I know you found some documents we talked about, but I don't remember.
I found the ordinance in the minutes for the meeting, and it was the first ordinance passed by planning and zoning. So it is the planning and zoning ordinance. But I cannot find,
I guess I would argue
reports
that
at planning and zoning,
a rationale.
and I don't have.
And I guess I would argue, if you were gonna play devil's advocate, that somewhere along the line, somebody said, well, we've got these new zoning ordinance that says we're gonna have a 60-foot lot line on R1 lots. And so we've got to standardize that. And so in one fell swoop, they limited and precluded the utility that the owners had for the 50-foot lots. This shouldn't be an issue that is difficult to remedy. And I would argue that in the grand scheme of things, it actually is beneficial to the old part of town. Because those people who own 2, 3 lots maybe together, and okay, let's drive around the old part of town. How many less than well cared for dwellings can we find on the old lots in that part of town? I think that to make a change in a fairly simple fashion enhances the owner's utility of those lots, and also stands a very good chance of maybe cleaning up some problem properties around town, instigating and invigorating some urban revitalization. There's a big component in the county's new master plan that strongly advocates that approach, to go back to some smaller lots, a little more dense in the appropriate location. Perhaps you handle this with a planned, leave it in the R1, but on a case-by-case, handle it as a plan. The argument's been made that if we were to do this, we would devalue the lot of the property owner who has 2 lots. That is actually not correct. But what we're going to do is offer the opportunity to enhance that property ownership. Because in Centralia, Mexico, I've been at this long enough to know, and somebody might argue that, well, that doesn't make sense, but trust me, it does. A lot in Centralia is worth X number of dollars. A building lot is worth X number of dollars. 50-foot lot, 60-foot lot, 100-foot lot. Because in a residential building project, you can only put so many dollars into your land, whether you've got a little bitty piece, whether you've got 3 times that piece. And that lot value and it will change in different subdivisions or different parts of town. But in the older part of town where we're talking about on these 50-foot lots, that lot is only worth so many dollars. And if you put 2 of those lots together, it's still only worth the same amount of money. Maybe a tiny bit more, but it's not going to be worth double. If that single lot's worth 30,000, the double lot's not worth 60. It'll never happen. Mark has borne that out for decades. If you allow this ordinance to go away, it enhances the utility of those lots. Goes back to what they were originally platted for. Thereby enhances the value of those lots, incentivizes a developer to build 2 houses instead of 1, and never harm the guy who's got, let's say he's got 3 lots with a house built across 2 lines and this single one out here. His whole 3 lots are still basically worth the same amount of money as his 1 lot. Because that's just, you can't put any more value into the land and in the project than what economics will allow. It works. And so I guess my request would be to act with some, we don't know what their motivation was. And I suspect that it was to thinking that, well, we've got a 60-foot lot size, let's standardize it. And so they went blissfully down that road. I think we have a chance to do something different here that would actually enhance and improve the older part of town and the utility and clean up and revitalize some of these older lots in town. I'm not sure that should be anything more difficult than doing away with that. But if you don't want to turn loose of that, maybe a plan, to have these things requested to planning and zoning, subject to a plan, demonstrate what's going to be done, assure that there's no harm to any. I don't see how there would ever be any harm to any existing surrounding properties because you're going to generally clean up a mess. We've got, go around Central Street, we've got newer houses on 50-foot lots. The benefit of this to the city and to the property owners far outweighs trying to align with any okay. So
Point out that when I first moved to town, that I've been getting close to 30 years now. G.B. Rollins subdivision, which is over by the junior high, was really kind of a dump of a neighborhood. Over the years, it has been revitalized. Some of the houses have been torn down and been 2 houses built back in on those lots. Clearly in violation of what this says. But it happened. That neighborhood is actually a pretty nice neighborhood. It just happened. People started building houses in there. They tore houses down. There's a lot of houses in there on 50-foot lots. Some of them are 50-foot plus part of another lot. Some of them are on double lots. But it's a nice neighborhood. And I would say that none of those lots that are 50-foot lots detracts from that neighborhood. That whole neighborhood has gone up in value tremendously since I first moved here. I think this ordinance that we're looking at, which is the zoning ordinance, Article 2R1, 31-20, if you go down to F, where it says, but provided further that were 2 contiguous adjacent lots in common ownership as of January 9th, 1961 have been used as 1 lot by erecting a dwelling on the common lot line, that no further dwelling shall be erected on either lot. I think that whole section should be struck, and they should just go back. They should be allowed to, because I agree with Boyd. I don't see that this harms the neighborhood. If every lot in there was on a double lot, I might disagree with that. But where there's mixed use out there, I don't see that it harms the neighborhood at all. Newer homes on there actually enhance.
if I may, read that again, please, sir.
But provided further that were 2 contiguous adjacent lots in common ownership as of January 9th, 1961, have been used as 1 lot by erecting a dwelling on the common lot line, that no further dwellings shall be erected on either lot, which kind of says you can't build on it ever again.
We agree that is worded very well.
Then I seen something like this before though. Have been used as one lot by erecting a dwelling on the common lot line, that no further dwelling shall be erected on either lot. What they were trying to prevent was, okay, this guy owns 2 lots, and somewhere up here towards the front end, he built a house across the lot line. I might argue that they were trying to prevent a situation where somebody said, hey, I got 2 lots, let's go back here on the back corner of this one and build another house over here. Their intent was probably that there never be 2 houses on those 2 lots at the same time. Not that they could never be split apart.
But in R1, you can only put one home on a lot.
But we have actually divided some of those that were like that. Where
Yeah,
there was a house on the front, they divided it, turned the lots the other way and did a lot split.
No, but I mean, it may
Changing the
be-
layout of what the lot
Changing the
was.
layout of the lot.
It may be they were trying to prevent 2 houses on 2 lots at the same time.
But we've got a lot split procedure that would take care of that.
Yeah.
So, I think if that last portion was removed, that's what we should do. I mean, it is extremely poorly worded. I really wouldn't have too much of an objection to that either.
But basically having,
Because if you take the position and say, okay, we don't want to strike this, we want to keep this in the ordinance, then you're kind of stuck with having to answer the question, what's the harm in doing a lot split, bringing it back out to 2, and as long as the setbacks are met and everything else complies, you're using that lot in the fashion that it was platted, you kind of then have to offer up, okay, what's the harm in using it the way it was designed? If you don't, probably the common sense solution is to strike that ambiguous paragraph, because I think it would be really difficult to find a harm to the neighborhood if you build on a 50-foot lot. Because there's evidence in town, as you say, that it's been improved.
Any other comments? I was around for a lot of those, and I don't recall anything that didn't adhere to the tenets of the code as written in state. Lot lines, square footage, depending on the zoning district. I think once that subdivision was filled out, that it became sort of baked in expectation of people who had houses there, that their neighbors didn't go back suddenly change the character of the neighborhood. So I'm not sure that it is always an improvement to the neighborhood. City tried to get rid of a whole bunch of bad, dilapidated inferior housing to the extent that we budgeted for incentives to tear down dilapidated houses, build new houses, existing subdivisions. It really didn't accomplish a whole lot. I mean, most years we never spent out the incentive that was in the budget. What made a difference was when we started to become a destination city in the suburb of Columbia, for various reasons. And it became possible for developers to look at those dilapidated and substandard houses and buy them to tear them down and replace them or do total remodels on their own. And they went out and did that without to the incentives. So I think the current market is still working its way through the city doing just that. Your realtor, you look skeptical. You have the hands-on experience that I don't, but
And that's what I said a while ago. If the city would have the wisdom to make this change and to allow the use, because the only reason we can't use that 50-foot lot right now is because of that one area. And that's what I was getting at in my economic example. The biggest reason, the incentive that the city provided, beneficial as it might have been, was not enough to overcome the cost and to incentivize the development. Because when you buy that lot with the old house, let's say what you got, and in this case, we've got to focus on two lots, because that's the question. It's going to cost X number of dollars to acquire that property. And given the value of real estate in Central, that's not a low number. So if you have to give a significant investment to get a property that is deficient and not usable, and then tear that building down and haul it off, at that point, you are backwards in the project before you ever go on the ground. Because there's more cost in getting that raw site than there is than what you can recoup in the sale of the developed property. And the argument, okay, fine, I'm making an argument because I've got an application that I submitted 60, 70 days ago to get a ruling on this, and it's just been punted down the road, and we took at least tonight. It doesn't matter whether it's me, Dan Adams, or anybody else. The same argument applies to any developer. That if that property, that I have to be really careful what I say in this day and age, if that property that is maybe not livable, doesn't really conform with the rest of the neighborhood because of lack of maintenance or whatever, can be acquired and changed into a new property. Any incentives that can be structured into it to enhance that becomes a benefit for the city and for the neighborhood. You know, if removing that one paragraph is the obstacle between, oh, yuck, I wish somebody would do something with that thing, and we've been saying it for 17 years, and we can find properties in this town where that has been said for 17 years. If that one paragraph is the obstacle between that and, holy smoke, they got rid of that thing and we're building 2 new houses, and now we got 2 new young families that can move in close to school, and we got 2 new houses on the tax roll, where's the harm? Why wouldn't we?
One thing that this does is, and a lot of the current philosophy in planning and zoning is to do infill in these neighborhoods, and this does accomplish that. They're smaller lots, you could build cheaper homes on there, starter homes for people. I think it's a good idea.
I would make this statement in general about it. That door can swing both ways. You can say it's always going to be a benefit. That's not necessarily a claim. So if you strike the whole paragraph, you open it up it can be built. You spoke earlier about the fact that a clause that the option would be to come in front of the planning and zoning. I don't mind that idea, because I think there's areas absolutely that's right, and I think there's other ways that wouldn't be.
Then I'm back to my question. Define for me the harm in using a platted 7,000 foot, 50-foot wide lot with appropriate setbacks. Define for me the harm to the city or the neighborhood if a new home is constructed under those circumstances.
Depending on what's going on in that area of revitalization that's going on in town, because anytime a lot came available and we vacated one because it was a dump, look around in Centralia, how many economical homes available for first-time home builders, for people without one, have no garage. They're small little sheds, houses. They're on Booth. They're on all these streets in town of the infrastructure where we have cannibalized terrible lots of smaller size, which we allow to build back. Is that not correct? If you have a lot, it can be built back to the setbacks that it originally was, and smaller lots. We have that all over town. And I would absolutely say, traveling all through town all the time, we have as many of those places that have been revitalized and redone as we have had that are still available out there. So I think that the lack of inventory and of land development that we have challenged for a while, and that's getting better, makes people look at where can I build if you're a builder or investor and a developer to look inside what's in town that's dilapidated. We've had a lot of that go on in the last 3 to 4 years of new home permits that have taken those houses just like you talk about. So I don't completely disagree at all in any way, shape, or form about those lots that potentially could be 50 foot, not 60, would be of value in an area. I just think there should be some protection that it's just turned loose and opened back up, that if you can buy one, you can put whatever you want to in there based upon what's been put up around.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is take the argument that you just made, do away with that impediment, and put a rocket ship under the argument you just made. Fuel that incentive. The control is still there in the building codes and the setbacks for the, none of that goes away. All I'm saying is get this impediment of, well, you have one house on 2 lots, so you can't have 2 lots. Do away with that stranglehold, then you just put jet fuel on your argument and cause people to want to do it more.
We have had very few people want we've had tons of people want to take a smaller lot and tear a home down and get the money for it, for tearing it down and getting paid for putting the house back up. Then we have had larger homes in this town, and it goes on a regular basis. So there's jet fuel already going on in that situation, as far as I'm concerned. And I have a concern. That if you take and put 2 smaller homes in a certain area of certain development where there's an area that's growing and going, and people are putting $300,000 houses in on a place where there was a one that's starting to be, and it really is. We can all agree to that. That there's an immediate appreciation of the homes around it that are smaller, absolutely in that situation. And if it's in a situation where they're all smaller homes, that are all going to be appreciated the same way if it's a new home, period.
The only place in town where this is going to apply, and change the wording in the ordinance, or if you want to lift the ordinance, change it. The only place this is going to apply is in the original town of Central, where the lot
trying to figure out how, if we eliminate that one part of the section, it then affects people who want to reorganize the lot line so that the houses are facing cases the street. Everybody ends up with a much smaller backyard. We've approved those. Because
but
they
they ended up,
had the minimum square footage requirement.
and they had the 60-foot frontage.
Mr.
In fact, they did it that way because they needed the 60 foot. Because they had 100
Support.
100-foot lot or 250-foot lot, and they couldn't get to the 6. That was usually the response, and we have approved those. On the other hand, we have things like Reed Street, where they platted out a subdivision in the old days for P&Z. I'm not sure what there. Well, but the plat really meant almost nothing because they built a house, and then the next developer wanted to build something, so they scratched the line that became the new property line, and they had a deed that conveyed lots 1 and 2 in the north 10 feet of lot 3, and they just grew down the block that way. And so, probably half the houses in this town that are over 2 separate.
And you can always find, I think the answer to your question is that the original plats, the original town plat, the only town I'm talking about, your concern, I think, would become self-limiting because those are rectangular lots with, rectangular because they're, the block and then it goes back with an alley between them. I think your argument becomes self-limiting because the only place it could conceivably even happen would be the 4 lots on the corners, and maybe somebody could say, hey, I want to turn and face the side street, but then you can't do that because it's only 50 feet wide, so unless you're gonna live in a house that's about 9.5 feet deep, you're not gonna be able to meet the setbacks. And so I think that becomes a self-limiting concern. Yes, but maybe I see the concern that, well, what if we build a whole bunch of little houses around some base in the old part of town where they built a newer property? And I suppose, I guess I would argue that
We have the condition where that can be done right.
exactly. And for something, and to say that, okay, the developer can go back and use this 50-foot lot, he still has to submit a building permit, it still has to meet the setbacks, and there wouldn't be any covenants in those old parts of towns to prescribe for garages or sizes or anything. I guess my question, and at this point, the question has been on the table long enough for one of my projects. It needs some resolution, hopefully favorable resolution, to not become a stumbling block. And if the answer is, well, this is the way it is, they'll never come back, then say so, and that shuts the door, I think, on a lot of potential good for the old part of town.
I think the current market is doing a lot of good. Everybody kept those in a very limited income.
That's what you will see in the new county master plan, is a strong emphasis on increased density and infill and urban revitalization to try to address those concerns and those people who can't build by 3 lots, 4 lots in town, put a in the old town, put $300,000 house on.
Does it really have that much effect in the county? Because I don't see very many unincorporated areas in the county that have the density that we have in central.
No, you don't have that.
No.
And they could be scattered.
But
Well,
the new plan that they've got is they're trying to prevent sprawl, which we have a lot of in this county. And they would rather see that property, people build in town, even on smaller lots.
They could drive it.
And that's the way it will actually work, is that in the county endeavor to prevent sprawl that we've seen in the past, there could potentially be a lack of approval out here, which will be the pressure in here to say, okay, let's look at density and let's utilize some of these spaces that are available. And we've belabored this probably long enough that I think the proposal that's been brought, the request that's been brought, is beneficial to not only my project, but to others, and can be handled in a manner that will be tactful and tasteful. And maybe but even if you go and make it a planned district, you're gonna end up with lot zoning, that doesn't even become a real good approach. You know, I mean, it's a way to do it to give some oversight, I guess.
But in GB Rollins, you've got lots on, houses on 50-foot lots, you've got lots, houses on 100-foot, 2 lots. You've got lots on a lot and a half. I don't think it affects their property values over there.
May have to do with how close they are to one another. Those are not zoned R1.
No, those are actually zoned R2, I believe. And yet it's, nobody's building R2 over there. It's all R1, buildings, almost everything.
We had or two proposed.
Yeah.
Happily, which is why it's something we're looking at now in Northbury Town makes a great deal of sense. We have the lot split qualification, administrative subdivision. So things can take place quickly if that's part of a problem. But on my behalf, I presume on Heather and Tara and Matt, they looked at that in consultation with the existing parameters of the zoning ordinance. So they had something they could objectively refer to. We start to do something like treat it as a minor subdivision and comment from the neighbors and stuff like that. It adds a layer that's gonna be detrimental to the developer, particularly the way inflation drives prices up, waiting 3 months for something for in the best terms, the subdivision approval, situation like this. It becomes more subjective and it becomes more costly, probably makes it unworkable for somebody who's not a professional developer. So I don't know what you do.
Can my request be accomplished with a lot split request?
I haven't looked at it from that. I don't believe so, though. I'm gonna have to look at the property and see. Is it a corner lot?
No.
I'm not remembering. I don't believe so.
Yeah, it's not on the corner.
So, general area, specific address.
South Rollins. Old part of South Rollins. R1. I considered a rezoning request, but it would have been an island in the sea of R1 and I wouldn't have to go down there.
Not illegal. It's been done. At least
I said on the side
it
of the
was
table.
done with public comment. It was done with public comment before the rezoning.
What's
I'm
that?
thinking of the duplexes over on Jefferson Street.
But I'm wanting to leave them R1. I just want 2 R1s instead of 1. I'm trying to make this simple.
Yeah, and nothing in my mind whether we solve your problem just by eliminating one house being built over.
If that paragraph was on, it solves the problem.
Well, I'm not sure.
Not the whole paragraph,
Well, yeah, I mean-
just from the butt on.
Yeah. We don't know what they were thinking. I would almost argue they were trying to prevent someone from putting 2 houses on adjoining 2 lots, which would be foolish.
Well, you had a lot on Well, you had 70-foot lots, but it was way towards the middle. You could do a property line adjustment where one lot was large enough to accommodate the existing house and still leave a 60-foot or a 50-foot. And you can take that down the whole overall. True. I know that we've had houses that have taken into consideration the fact that it, in modern terms, it's a narrow lot, and they have built it accordingly. They've built not quite shotgun houses, but they've been able to do a house that isn't 50 foot across. It's more like
The reality of it is, to use that lot, you're gonna have to be a little bit creative, and in order to be creative, it's gonna be, okay, it's gonna be something that will be good.
and you go 2 stories to get the square footage. And well, I mean, it's a possibility. Anybody have recommendations?
I'm not sure you'll go along with it, but I would make a motion that we would, take that paragraph and strike the everything, after the but provided further.
You realize that that's an ordinance change with a public hearing, the municipal zoning ordinance, and it would be terribly difficult to get it done in 2 months. Unless you,
Well, there has to be a public hearing before this board, and then a public hearing before,
Well, first, the Board of Aldermen at the next meeting would have to accept your recommendation and give the city attorney, the power to modify the ordinance. The city attorney would then modify the ordinance based on the recommendation of P and Z. It would then go in front of P and Z and a public hearing at that time, and then it would also go in front of a public hearing.
yes.
not an immediate process.
Been going on for a while now, so it's a little more weeks.
When we have other just changes.
Yeah.
I know, we just rewrote the whole zoning and the whole subdivision for better or worse before I left, so they've not been in effect all that long. I wouldn't want to do it again, we're gonna have to make piecemeal changes. And there's probably 4 or 5 and soon to be discovered more.
Motion on the floor.
That's my motion.
Is there a second?
There has not been any.
No gave up. Hearing no second, the motion fails.
I mean, barring that, I do think that there ought to be an administrative, way of letting somebody look at it and decide. I mean, if every lot in the subdivision has been built on 2 lots, then the argument at that point is, yes, it's detrimental, it may be detrimental to the neighborhood. That is not generally the case for, what we're looking at. There ought to be an administrative way of taking care of this, even if it has to come back before P and Z. I'm not sure how to accomplish that, but I think there should be a method of taking care of it.
Would
You can think of one and can get together with the staff to put form a proposal and come back to us.
I was about to ask if the commission would want for me to, look at the sample ordinances from other cities and
Sure.
Yes,
Absolutely.
We will avoid infelicities of language that exists now. And we also get to the point, of how big a problem is this? I mean, how much of the city is planned with 50-foot lots and zoned R1?
It would take some time, but I think that we could, gather some information on that. We'd have to look at the
If you
parcel map.
or small, you have a large copy of the plan that
Are you wanting to look specifically just in the Old Town?
Well,
No, no.
not just the original town, there are a lot of other subdivisions that were done in the late 1800s, maybe early 1900s, that had a 50-foot lot. You don't see many 50-foot lots beyond, that. And since 1960, the requirement has been 60-foot lots.
Right.
So we wouldn't be talking about those at all.
You're talking about go back, look, in R1.
how big a problem is it?
I understand.
But I want any solution, I recommend any solution, don't put the onus on staff to make a subjective determination.
I would agree
You
with
want to have objective criteria.
Absolutely.
Mr. Burns, what do you mean by how big a problem is it? If I may.
Suppose we're gonna step on it if we allow it. That's subjective too.
I think in the interest of the city, we should be looking more at how can it be used to clean up messes. The probability of cleaning up messes, I would argue, is much greater than the probability of cleaning up messes.
I think that once the house is deal with the nature, the benefit of being in place. That 150-foot lots anyway are not.
I can think of 2 or 3 other cases where this has stopped from developers from doing what they wanted to do.
2 or 3.
2 or 3 is enough to disincentivize the whole bunch. I mean, at this point, I mean, I've got, it should make sense and will be good, and this body is telling me no, don't do it. That's the decision tonight. Is to say that to build 2 new houses is not beneficial.
I think that it has to be the recommendation tonight that not violate the zoning regs. What you're asking would require changes.
And by not moving that way tonight, has been the answer. So I'm gonna let the matter drop. Resolve it, I don't care. And
You
either
would
itself,
we need a motion in no second.
because with all due respect, thank you for your time.
Do we have any asthma on ice, Sarah?
We do not.
Do we normally have a, comment for citizens? This, if there wasn't anything listed. I don't know if there were any, but.
I don't know that we usually do have comments from citizens during a committee meeting.
Well, I think it's up to the chairman of the committee whether he wants to entertain or she.
I don't remember. We didn't at the
No
last
reason
meeting.
why it can't.
It wasn't on the agenda at the last meeting.
I don't know if I remember ever having
Not
That-
during planning and zoning.
planning and zoning.
Because usually comments from citizens are for comments directed towards the Board of Aldermen because they make decisions for the city. What would that accomplish zoning?
I was wondering. And it's not really that we have limited citizens from coming, generally speaking.
Obviously not.
Right.
James has a question. I respectfully was going to suggest that you have comments from citizens back when you had the first discussions of some of Darien Southwest Quadrant developments. Can you help me with this?
Those are public hearings for those developments.
Yeah, those were public hearings, I believe. Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to think about earlier, right? We had public, that, I thought about that, and then I thought, well, that was a public hearing, why those people showed up. So that's, I was trying to think myself if I'd ever seen us have comments from citizens in this venue here versus what I'm in over there, you know, what the regular duties. And so I thought the same thing a little bit. So.
Where we have to have a public hearing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's cool. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
What he said second?
You said second, I thought.
No.
Oh.
I heard.
I was saying it too. I can do that. The mayor just wanted something. I can second my own motion. I didn't know that. So,
I will second.
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Hey, thank you guys for joining. Hey, thank you too for joining and sitting online. Thanks. Virtually. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Bye.
Um,